They say the most dangerous thing in the world is an idea with no master. It can't be chained. It can't be killed. It spreads in silence, one mind at a time. That's why tyrants don't just fear armies. They fear books. Not because books hold power, but because they give it to anyone, anywhere, without permission. Throughout history, forbidden books weren't just banned. They were hunted, torn from shelves, burned in streets, buried beneath governments, religions, regimes. Because somewhere deep inside their pages was something unacceptable, a new way to think. In 1530, a man rewrote the sky, and the church tried to erase him. Centuries later, that pattern continues. The method changes. The fear remains. Now, censorship doesn't always wear robes. Sometimes it wears code, or policy, or community guidelines. But the goal is the same: control what can be thought by controlling what can be read. This is not just a story about books. It's a story about control, about silence, about who gets to decide what truth is allowed and what truth is erased. Because in every era, the most powerful question has never changed: who decides what knowledge is safe? It started with a question. A man, alone with numbers and stars, dared to ask, what if the Earth isn't the center of the universe? His name was Nicholas Copernicus. His answer would shatter 1,500 years of doctrine. In the early 1500s, the Catholic Church controlled more than faith. It controlled cosmos itself. According to accepted belief, Earth was at the center, fixed, immovable. Everything, sun, stars, planets, revolved around it. It wasn't just religion, it was order. The universe mirrored the hierarchy of power. God above, heaven around, man below. Copernicus's theory broke that design. His sun-centered model, heliocentrism, didn't just move planets. It moved power. Because if Earth isn't at the center, then maybe man isn't either. And if man isn't, then maybe the church isn't. Copernicus hesitated to publish his work. Not because he doubted the math, but because he feared the reaction. In 1543, De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium was released, quietly, cautiously. It was radical. It was heretical. It was ignored. First. Then came Giordano Bruno. He took Copernicus further, proposing an infinite universe, filled with stars and other worlds. He wasn't just a scientist. He was a mystic. And to the church, he was a threat. Bruno was arrested, tried for heresy, and in 1600, he was burned alive in Rome. Not for what he believed, but for what he wrote. The message was clear: truth that threatens structure must be destroyed. So in 1616, the Vatican took action. It created the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. Copernicus, banned. Galileo, censored. Kepler, monitored. Knowledge wasn't outlawed for being false, but for being too true. This was the beginning of something new. Not the control of people, but the control of perception. Because if you can erase the book, you erase the question. And if you erase the question, you never need to answer it. After Copernicus, the battle lines were drawn. The war wasn't over territory anymore. It was over the mind. And the first casualty was curiosity. The Inquisition was more than trials and torture. It was information control at a civilizational scale. Anything book, letter, speech, diagram that challenged doctrine could be labeled heresy. Not because it was wrong, but because it was unapproved. Galileo Galilei was next. Armed with a telescope, he saw the impossible: moons orbiting Jupiter, not Earth. Phases of Venus, impossible under geocentrism. Evidence, proof, but truth wasn't enough. In 1633, Galileo was summoned to Rome, forced to recant under threat of torture, sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. His book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, was banned. His name silenced. Then there was Lucilio Vanini, a philosopher who spoke openly about the possibility of a natural, mechanical universe, a cosmos without divine intervention. For that, he was arrested, tried, condemned. In 1619, Vanini's tongue was torn out before he was strangled and burned. The message was simple: some ideas are so dangerous, they must not only be censored, they must be annihilated. And it worked. For generations, Europe existed in a climate of fear. Authors wrote under false names. Printers hid presses in cellars. Readers whispered forbidden texts in secret rooms. Knowledge became contraband. Truth became treason. But even under ashes, embers smolder. Because ideas, unlike armies, don't need borders. They need only memory. And even burned books leave traces in minds brave enough to remember. They burned the pages, but they couldn't burn the questions. As the flames of the Inquisition faded, a new form of control emerged. Not through fire, not through execution, through curation. If burning books was too brutal, then selecting which books survive was far more effective. Why silence a thinker when you can simply edit the record? Why destroy knowledge when you can redirect it? The age of the gatekeepers had begun. Institutions, councils, curators, censors under 1,000 different names. Their mission? Not to kill ideas, but to filter them. Universities became fortresses. Only safe knowledge was taught. Only acceptable theories were funded. Only authorized history was written. Libraries grew, but their catalogs were pruned. Publishers flourished, but their editorial boards were gateways. The printing press had democratized knowledge. So the system evolved, not to stop printing, but to control what got printed. Even the Index Librorum Prohibitorum adapted. Over centuries, it ballooned to thousands of banned titles. Science, philosophy, literature, not because the books were lies, but because they posed the wrong questions. And slowly, a terrifying idea took hold, that knowledge itself needed permission. Truth wasn't enough. It had to be approved. Discovery wasn't enough. It had to be aligned. Thinking wasn't enough. It had to be controlled. And here's the trap. The more complex the world became, the easier it was to justify gatekeepers. People need guidance. They can't handle dangerous ideas. We must protect society from falsehoods. Maybe those reasons were sincere. Maybe they weren't. But the result was the same. A world where the key to the library wasn't free to everyone. Freedom of thought had a price, and the gatekeepers held the receipt. If the past censored ideas with fire, the 20th century industrialized it. Control wasn't a reaction anymore. It was a system. Totalitarian regimes didn't fear the printing press. They weaponized it. In Nazi Germany, censorship wasn't subtle. On May 10, 1933, in university towns across Germany, students, professors, and officials gathered to burn books deemed un-German. Thousands of volumes, Einstein's theories, Freud's psychology, Marx's critiques, science, philosophy, art, all turned to smoke under banners that read, "Against the un-German spirit." But it wasn't just burning, it was reprogramming. New textbooks, new histories, new truths. The goal wasn't just silence, it was replacement. Meanwhile, across the world in the Soviet Union, a different kind of censorship took root. Not fiery, not public, surgical, systematic, silent. Books were rewritten, authors erased. Entire fields of science, like genetics under Lysenkoism, were banned if they didn't fit party ideology. Truth wasn't just hidden, it was remade. Boris Pasternak, author of Dr. Zhivago, was forbidden from publishing in the USSR. His novel, A Tale of Individual Freedom Amid Soviet Oppression, was smuggled to the West and won the Nobel Prize. The Soviet government branded him a traitor. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, whose Gulag archipelago exposed the horrors of Soviet labor camps, was expelled from his homeland. His words, too powerful to be permitted. In Maoist China, the Cultural Revolution waged an all-out assault on knowledge. Ancient philosophy, poetry, science, torn apart by Red Guards. Libraries looted. Scholars humiliated, imprisoned, killed. Millions of books destroyed. Entire veins of culture severed in the name of purity. But even in free nations, censorship took quieter forms. In the United States, during the Red Scare, blacklists silenced writers, directors, professors. Books suspected of promoting subversive ideas were banned from schools. Artists were surveilled, interrogated, ruined. The methods differed. The message stayed the same. Some knowledge is dangerous, not because it's false, but because it threatens power. You don't have to burn a book to kill an idea. You just have to make people too afraid to read it. The printing press once shattered the monopoly on information. The internet promised to do it again. Open, free, untouchable. At first, but power adapts. Today, censorship doesn't need bonfires or secret police. It happens silently, elegantly, with a click, with a line of code, with an algorithm. Information isn't destroyed. It's buried beneath mountains of noise, under manipulated search results, behind content filters you don't even see. Shadow bans, demonetization, visibility throttling, no arrests, no book burnings, just silence. You think you're free to search anything, but your results are curated, prioritized, framed, not by accident, by design. Governments learned this quickly. China's Great Firewall isn't just censorship, it's a parallel internet, a closed garden where only state-approved information blooms. Western democracies learned too. During crises, algorithms tighten. During elections, platforms moderate. Certain ideas violate guidelines and vanish, not because they're illegal, but because they're harmful, dangerous, unverified. Definitions that change depending on who holds the pen. Today, the guardians of knowledge aren't priests or censors. They're tech companies, moderators, fact-checkers, AI filters, and their decisions shape what you see, what you read, what you know, or rather, what you're allowed to know. In the digital age, censorship isn't about erasing pages. It's about making sure you never know which page you missed. Freedom of information didn't die. It was out-algorithmed. We like to think we're past the age of book bans, that censorship is a relic of darker times. But the truth, it never left. It simply adapted. Today, entire regimes still treat books as weapons. In China, works on democracy, human rights, and Tiananmen Square are banned. Authors like Liu Xiaobo were imprisoned for subversive writing. Even fictional dystopias like 1984 and Animal Farm are restricted because metaphors are dangerous, because imagination is a threat. In Iran, books questioning religious orthodoxy are blacklisted. Translations of Western philosophy are censored or heavily edited. Writers face harassment, surveillance, or exile. The government doesn't fear guns. It fears a teenager reading Rousseau. It fears a mother discussing Descartes. In North Korea, independent reading is practically illegal. Possession of foreign literature, even a single page, can mean execution. The only books permitted are those that glorify the regime. Reality is rewritten at the border, and knowledge is locked behind walls. But censorship isn't just a weapon of authoritarianism. Even in democracies, certain books face quiet suppression. School boards ban novels under the banner of protection. Universities withdraw controversial texts fearing offense. Libraries face political pressure to deshelve challenging ideas, not through government decree, but through social enforcement, through fear of backlash, through the slow erosion of intellectual courage. Today's censorship is often crowdsourced, amplified by outrage, hidden behind algorithms, framed as safety. But the principle remains: some ideas are too dangerous to allow, not because they're false, but because they challenge the structure. In every era, forbidden books reveal the same truth, that power is less afraid of lies than it is of free thought. Armies can be crushed, rebellions can be put down, but a thought is viral, crosses borders, it survives prisons, it leaps from mind to mind without permission. And that's why, throughout history, rulers feared ideas more than invasions. A gun can take a life, a book can change millions. One mind ignited by a forbidden idea becomes a beacon others can follow. And that's the nightmare for every system built on obedience, that the governed might start thinking for themselves. Control is about predictability. If you can predict behavior, you can control outcomes. But free thought is chaotic. It asks uncomfortable questions. Why should we obey? Why is this the only way? What else could be possible? And when those questions spread, no wall, no army, no surveillance can contain them. That's why censorship isn't about suppressing lies. It's about containing possibilities. If people don't imagine alternatives, they won't demand them. If they don't read forbidden ideas, they'll never realize they're prisoners. Modern regimes learned this lesson well. Control the narrative. Control the questions. Control the imagination. Let people feel free to think. as long as they never think outside the authorized boundaries. A mind that questions is a mind that cannot be owned. And that's why free thought will always be feared more than rebellion. The phrase sounds simple: we must protect people from dangerous ideas. But dangerous to whom? To governments? To religions? To corporations? To old systems built on fragile myths? The truth is, there's no objective list of safe knowledge. History shows that ideas once labeled dangerous often become tomorrow's common sense. Galileo's telescope, Darwin's evolution, Martin Luther's reform, Harriet Tubman's defiance. Each at one time was considered a threat. Each at one time was censored, banned, hunted. Today, we forget that. We forget that censorship always wears the costume of virtue. Protecting the people, preventing harm, maintaining order. Noble words, weaponized for control. But here's the deeper question: can knowledge ever truly be safe? Because every idea carries a risk. Risk to authority, risk to comfort, risk to the status quo. That's what makes knowledge powerful, and that's what makes it dangerous. When someone claims they are protecting you by limiting access to information, they are not protecting you. They are protecting themselves from the chaos of a free mind. And when you allow others to decide what you can know, you surrender more than access. You surrender agency. You surrender the right to choose your own reality. Free thought is risky, dangerous, uncomfortable, but without it, you aren't safe. You're obedient. We think we've evolved. No more bonfires of forbidden words. No more secret police raiding libraries. No more public executions for the crime of thinking. But the reality is simpler and more chilling. Today, we don't burn books. We simply hide them, suppress them, filter them. We drown dangerous ideas beneath a flood of noise. We algorithm them out of view. We shame, censor, deplatform. No need for flames. Silence is much cleaner. The goal is the same. Control what you see. Control what you think. Control what you believe is possible. And in some ways, this new censorship is even more effective. Because you don't see the chains. You don't feel the locks. You feel free. But you are still fenced. You believe you have access to everything without realizing how much has been quietly erased. A banned book is obvious. A shadow-banned idea is invisible. And an invisible cage is the hardest to escape. We still burn books. We just use different fuel. And we don't call it censorship anymore. We call it safety. We call it moderation. We call it progress. So the next time you pick up a book, or search for an idea, or ask a dangerous question, remember, you're not just seeking knowledge. You're reclaiming the most forbidden thing of all, the right to think for yourself.